What does a Trump win mean for Ukraine? Hey friends, Wes O'Donnell here, proud veteran of the U.S. Army Infantry and the U.S. Air Force. If you know me or you've read my work in the past, then you know that I've been an open supporter of Ukraine since the Euromaidan in 2013. I watched in horror as Vladimir Putin's little green men took Crimea and the Donbas from what was then an under-equipped Ukrainian military. Since then, I've been covering Ukraine in the press, and I have people I served with in the military personally train Ukrainians in the years leading up to the 2022 Russian full-scale invasion. I was proud to see my country step up and supply Ukraine with humanitarian assistance and, more importantly, lethal, modern weapon systems so it could defend itself from tyranny. But I was even prouder as I witnessed the Ukrainian fighting spirit and their ingenuity on the battlefield. I would be happy today to call any Ukrainian soldier my comrade. It's commonly understood that a Trump presidency would be bad news for Ukraine. Well, let's talk about it. Throughout his campaign, Trump has repeatedly claimed that he could wrap up the Ukraine-Russia war in a day. When pressured for details, he's hinted at brokering a deal. But specifics, well, he's keeping those close to his chest. What we do know is that Trump has a bit of a history with Ukraine, going so far as to call Zelensky a salesman who walks away with $60 billion every time he comes to the U.S. There's also Trump's admiration for Putin as a strongman that has many Europeans concerned. A research paper from two of Trump's former national security chiefs suggests a middle ground approach. Keep arming Ukraine, but make future support contingent on Kyiv entering peace talks with Russia. To sweeten the deal for Moscow, the West could even promise to pause Ukraine's NATO aspirations. The paper stops short of urging Kyiv to cede land, but it proposes negotiations based on the current battle lines. Trump's Democratic critics, who accuse him of pandering to Putin, argue that his approach is capitulation, putting all of Europe at risk. But Trump's priority, as he says, is to end the war and cut off what he sees as a bottomless drain on U.S. resources. His America First stance on the conflict also touches on NATO, the post-World War II military alliance initially set up to counter the Soviet Union, aka Russia. Trump has long been critical, accusing Europe of coasting under America's security umbrella. NATO, now with 32 member nations, faces an uncertain future when Trump returns to the White House. Would he actually pull the U.S. out? Well, that's the billion-dollar question. While some allies argue he's just using tough talk to pressure countries into meeting spending targets, NATO leaders are understandably nervous. Trump's return could dramatically shift the alliance's future, potentially weakening its deterrent effect in the eyes of adversaries. So, back to Ukraine. Here's what I expect to see. First, the Biden administration will attempt to spend every penny it can on Ukraine before January 20th, 2025. The Biden administration has been scrambling to ensure Ukraine has what it needs for a long-term fight, and Biden is now emptying out all of the congressionally allocated funds for Ukraine. Next, there is still bipartisan support for Ukraine in Congress, which gives us some hope for 2025. But realistically, and this part is important, the aid will eventually stop, probably by mid-2025. The EU and NATO must prepare to support Ukraine's resistance without any U.S. assistance. NATO must consolidate authority over the training of Ukrainian troops and the provision of military assistance starting now. There is already a mechanism in place called the NATO Security Assistance and Training for Ukraine, but it's not yet fully operational and won't be for several more months. An EU and G7 plan to help secure long-term funding for Ukraine's military and reconstruction is also in limbo. Hungary is blocking a change to EU sanctions on Russia's frozen assets that's necessary to issue a $50 billion loan to Ukraine using the windfalls from those assets. Russia alone is also producing around 3 million munitions per year, while NATO collectively is producing less than 2 million annually. That's not even counting what Russia is receiving from North Korea, Iran, and China. Matthew Saville, Director of Military Sciences at the Royal United Services Institute, noted that Trump's victory throws Ukraine's support network into murky waters. Zelensky has congratulated Trump, no doubt hoping his winner mindset means he'll back Ukraine. But Trump's love of quick deals doesn't bode well for ongoing support, especially with U.S. attention shifting toward China. Remember, the Project 2025 playbook that Trump may presumably follow looks to China as the main enemy to U.S. interests and leaves Europe to the Europeans. And I do agree that China is more of a threat to the U.S. than Russia is, especially after the Ukrainians have decimated Russian troop numbers and armored vehicles. But to allow Putin to take Ukraine would be a disaster for all of Europe. Could Donald Trump come in and actually end the war within a day? Of course not. Any proposed solution unfavorable to Ukraine, Zelensky could always say, thanks but no thanks, we're not giving up our territory for a bad peace, we choose to continue fighting. Look, you can joke all you want about America being the world police, but the truth is there has not been another global war since the end of World War II, when the U.S. stepped into its role as the guarantor of freedom. The United States is not a perfect nation, far from it. But like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Well, the history of the United States is long and bloody, but it bends toward freedom. To abandon Ukraine now to an authoritarian with his eyes on Europe would effectively relinquish America's leadership position in the world. The only silver lining for Ukraine might be that Trump will be too preoccupied at home throughout 2025 to make many decisions about Europe, at least for a while. Many predict Trump will use Project 2025 to take down the deep state as a template for his policies. This means he'll be cleaning house for a while, as his newly appointed director of the Department of Efficiency, Elon Musk, does to the federal government what he did to Twitter. That is to say, greatly reduce the federal workforce by 80%. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I am. I hope President-elect Trump will make the decision to continue supporting Ukraine and our European friends and allies. But if I were Ukraine, NATO, and Europe right now, I would begin preparing to face Russia on your own. That's all for now. If you hate authoritarians as much as I do, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Slava Ukraini.